Yeah, so the inflammation. So when you have these inflammatory markers, this is showing that your body is under, if you want to think about it as under duress. So it's really sending a signal. I like to use, if you think about a human being and you think of like little pockets of fire, like a burning house. And what happens a lot in regular conventional medicine is that they will give you a pill for the symptom, but the fire is still burning inside. So if we think about that cellular level, those mitochondria, or little powerhouses in there, are having problems. They can't generate the ATP that is our energy source that's put out to us. So when we are in those inflammatory stages, our body is really sending us a signal like, I need help. We've got to stop this. There's really big problems.
This is True Voice Unfiltered, the podcast where raw truth meets real transformation. I'm your host, Daria Anne, ghostwriter, content strategist, and holistic health warrior. No, I'm not a doctor, nurse, nutritionist, or any kind of medical professional, and this show does not dispense medical advice. I'm just an informed patient sharing what I've learned on my own healing journey. I also interview accomplished authors, speakers, entrepreneurs, and functional medicine practitioners who are transforming lives. If you're ready to break free from the sick care system, reclaim your health, and transform your life, you're in the right place. Let's get unfiltered. Hi, everyone, and welcome to episode 38 of True Voice Unfiltered. I am delighted to welcome my guest today. Her name is Jen Germain, and she is a functional medicine health coach, certified personal trainer, and the founder of Compass Health Coaching, LLC, in Carlisle, Pennsylvania. So Jen and I have a few things in common, being originally, I'm originally from Pennsylvania. And as she tells me in the interview, she moved around a lot because she's from a military family, but she has lived in central Pennsylvania for many, many years. And that is where she's located now. But what I love most about this interview is that Jen is an example of how we can overcome autoimmune conditions. And in her case, really difficult, really difficult diagnosis of inflammatory bowel disease and ulcerative colitis. So this came out of the blue. Often autoimmune conditions seem to do that, right? One day you're healthy and the next day you're starting to notice different symptoms. And if you're anything like me, and sometimes we dismiss these things as just whatever, it's just something I have to put up with. Oh, I'm getting older. And in my case, a lot of my symptoms, they didn't all happen at the same time. They weren't all that severe. It was just sort of over time. And so things can kind of fly under the radar. But in Jen's case, she was always very healthy. And then in May of 2020, she got sick. And at first she thought it was food poisoning. And then as the days and weeks went on, she realized it wasn't that. However, she says, I was too stubborn to go to the doctor. I thought it would go away. I was wrong. I can totally relate to that. Jen says, after months of running to the bathroom, fatigue, extreme inflammation that rippled through my body in the form of erythema nodules, I finally went to the doctor that August, so August 2020, and went for an emergency colonoscopy in September. That's when she was diagnosed with Crohn's and UC, ulcerative colitis. Jen says, frankly, I was devastated because I had always thought I was pretty healthy. I followed Sherry Pollux on Instagram and learned of functional medicine and thought that maybe that could help me. I didn't want a life of medications, injections, or surgeries. So I went to a functional medicine health coach and started the AIP diet in November of 2020. The AIP diet is autoimmune protocol, and we talk about that in the interview. Through my first 6 weeks, I started to feel brain fog I never knew I had start to lift, and my body started to heal in other ways. By Christmas, when I did my next round of blood work, my SED rate and CRP were actually within normal ranges, my anemia was gone, and everything was getting back on track. I got off all my flare medications within 9 months and haven't taken them since. I have not had a flare in over 5 years. So anyone out there, if you are dealing with a similar condition and you're going to a conventional doctor who's telling you you're going to have to be on medication the rest of your life, and maybe you don't want to be on medication the rest of your life, you want to find root cause healing, this interview is for you. We share Jen's information, her website, how to get in touch with her. If you're interested in doing a program with her, I would highly recommend it, especially if you're dealing with something like inflammatory bowel disease and ulcerative colitis. Because as you'll hear in the interview, it came on pretty quickly. She was always a very healthy person, always very active, and out of nowhere, she came down with this condition. But as you'll discover,
she was able to get it under control. And I don't know if I never like to use the word remission. I don't even do that for myself with Hashimoto's. I like to say maybe my symptoms are in remission. And we talk about, Jen and I, how once you find a protocol that works for you, you feel so great, you want to keep feeling great, and it's not really a sacrifice to stay on it. And for those of you out there who are sugar addicts, and I say that with love because, as I mentioned in the interview, the big joke in my family when my parents tried to limit sugar when I was very little, I would say, but I'm a good girl for the sugar. And Jen admits that she was once a candy girl. And if we can overcome that, you can too. And I just really love this interview. Jennifer is amazing and very down to earth, really has a genuine heart for helping other people dealing with similar things. So whatever your autoimmune condition is, reach out to Jen, work with her. I think you'll really enjoy meeting her in this interview. And as I said, if she can overcome something as debilitating as Crohn's and UC, there's hope for everyone out there suffering with autoimmune conditions. Let's go talk to Jen Germain, functional medicine health coach, certified personal trainer, and the founder of Compass Health Coaching. Jen Germain, welcome to True Voice Unfiltered. I am so excited to have you here today.
Oh, thank you so much. I'm really excited to be here today. Thank you for having me.
Yeah. Well, Jen, you have such a compelling story. And as I said offline, you and I have a few things in common, both of us from Pennsylvania,
Yep.
and both of us having overcome autoimmune conditions with functional medicine, but you actually turned that into a career. So tell us your story in your own words, and then I'm going to get into asking you some questions that we can help educate the audience with.
Sure. Awesome. So what actually happened with me was I wasn't really looking for a new career. I wasn't really, planning on changing anything. But back in May of 2020, it was a big year for a lot of people. Obviously, we had different things going on. But in May of 2020, for me, I, started to get sick. And at first, I thought it might be just food poisoning because I was like, this doesn't feel right. And there's a lot of stress going on at the time, obviously, for different reasons. But so I just didn't really think anything of it. And I was making multiple trips to the bathroom, not to get too graphic, but so I didn't think anything of it, just thought I had gotten sick from some bad food or something like that. But then it kept continuing and really didn't want to tell many people about it because it was like, okay, what might be wrong with me? And of course, me being the stubborn person that I am, did not go to seek like any kind of help because I'm like, it'll pass, I'm fine. So I just tried to push through. And so as I was going throughout the summer, it started to get predominantly worse. So I started going more times and started to feel a lot of fatigues, really starting to get like joint pain, all kinds of different pain everywhere. And in August of 2020, it really started to be more pronounced. So I started to have bleeding in my stool and everything else. So then I was like, you know what, maybe I should go to the doctor. And so I did go to my family physician and they did run some tests. And so some of those were like what is called the HSCRP, and that is for an inflammation marker. So that's C-reactive protein, and that measures the inflammation in your body. And mine was off the charts. It also did a sedimentation rate, which also measures your inflammation. And my sed rate was triple what it should be. And so, needless to say, when I went to the doctor for that, then I also got symptoms of like these nodules like all over my body. So I had them on my arms, I had them on my legs and my ankles. I had been out with my husband and out on the trails and I thought I'd twisted my ankle and because it was swelling. And here it was actually from what I was diagnosed with later. And I'll get into that in a minute. But the swelling, it was like bruising. So anytime I would have these nodules, and that was from basically like mid-August on, it was painful even to get into the shower. So like taking a shower, it was just the water hitting it. It was just like somebody was sticking you with knives. And that's what it felt like when I went into the shower. So then I even got exhausted from doing that. So I would get into the shower, come out, and I actually lay on the bed for like 20 minutes because I was exhausted just from doing that. So my body was so inflamed and just completely wiped out. And so when I finally went to the doctor and he actually tested for Crohn's, that came back negative. But he sent me for an emergency colonoscopy. And that is when they did find I have both ulcerative colitis and Crohn's. And so that just goes to show sometimes the testing is not always as accurate as and you have to dig deeper. So when they found that out, they could put me on some medication to start bringing down the flare. I went to a rheumatologist because I was in so much pain. And that was in October. So in September, I got my diagnosis of Crohn's and ulcerative colitis. And then in October, I was finally able to get into a rheumatologist, and he told me that because I asked him the question, could I do this without having to be on medications or anything for the rest of my life? And he said, no way. And he was like, nope, I honestly think you should be on a biologic the rest of your life. And, and I wouldn't even try, worrying about that. You could just do that. And me personally, I was sitting there. I've never really been on a lot of medications. I've been pretty healthy for my whole life. I was an athlete and relatively pretty healthy. And I was like, well, that's not good enough for me. I'm not gonna settle for being on medications or having possible multiple surgeries and then increasing my chances for cancer with the lifestyle that I had. So I knew I had to make a change. And I've been following this woman on Instagram. I knew her from my husband follows NASCAR, and she was actually a cancer survivor. And her name is Sherry Pollock. She has since passed away, but she introduced me to functional medicine. And interestingly enough, I dug into it around where I live and said, you know what? I bet they can help me. So I went to a functional medicine health coach myself in November of 2020. And she put me on what is called the autoimmune protocol diet, or AIP, which is very, very strict. And what a lot of people may not know is that I've been a sugar addict and a holic my whole life. Since I was a little girl, I was called the candy girl in my family. My favorite candy was Pez. And, and I was basically addicted. I had it everywhere. And so part of the autoimmune protocol diet is no sugar. You can't have any sugar. You have to cut out a lot of the processed foods. It's really just grass-fed meats and then certain vegetables and certain fruits. Seasoning, like very, very bland to give your body a sense of healing. And so I went on the 11th and started it on the 14th. And honestly, within a few days, I lost the brain fog I never knew I had. I had lost 20 pounds while I was sick. And then when I was on the AIP, I started to lose more weight, but I started to feel better. I started to have less pain. I had more energy. And I was on it for 6 weeks, the very strict, and then you start adding things in after the 6 weeks. And so when I went back for my blood work in December, and during this time, there was a lot of things going on. My parents went into the hospital for COVID, and I lost my father-in-law. So I had all of these other stressful things going on, but I started to even feel better just health-wise. And what happened was when I went back for my testing, my numbers were normal. My anemia was gone, and my anemia was pretty severe. My anemia was gone. My sed rate was normal. My CRP was normal, and all of my other markers were in the normal range. And again, I felt amazing. And in those 6 weeks, I actually lost 25 pounds. So believe it or not, and a lot of that was the inflammation, the water weight, like all of everything just, poured out. And so as I was going through and I kept adding things back in, I realized, you know what, I'm not adding the sugar back in. And I actually quit drinking because I was like, it's not worth it, because my health, getting up and feeling amazing every day was enough for me. It was worth it to me to not go back to the things that I had been doing. And as I continued on my health journey, I was like, you know what? I have to help other people. I can't keep this secret to myself. I have to help other people figure out what's going to work best for them to get to their amazing every day. And so I enrolled in the Functional Medicine Coaching Academy, took their course, got certified, and started my business in September of 2022.
Oh my gosh, Jen, so much to unpack there. I love, love, love your story. My God, so many things going through my head now. But I want to kind of take a step back and get back to like the inflammation piece you talked about, because I really want people to understand, like, we're talking about inflammation at the cellular level.
Yes.
And I mean, let me just say, when I first found functional medicine and had an HSCRP test, I was like 8.93, like something crazy. And really, functional medicine wants it like under 1.0.
Yep.
Can you talk about that a little bit so people really understand like what we mean when we say inflammation?
Yeah, so the inflammation, so when you have those inflammatory markers, this is showing that your body is under, if you want to think about it as under duress. So it's really sending a signal. I like to use, if you think about a human being and you think of like little pockets of fire, like a burning house. And what happens a lot in regular conventional medicine is that they will give you a pill for the symptom, but the fire is still burning inside. So if we think about that cellular level, those mitochondria, or little powerhouses in there, are having problems. They can't generate the ATP that is our energy source that's put out to us. So when we are in those inflammatory stages, our body is really sending us a signal like, I need help. We've got to stop this. There's really big problems. So, like you said, when you were at that 8.9, your body was saying, I'm on fire. We've got to put this out because the cells themselves cannot generate and they're malfunctioning because there's an issue. There's either a nutrient deficiency, or there might be, in some cases, for some people, it could be a pathogen or something coming in. And so it's really up to us to dig down. And that's why I love functional medicine. It's looking at that root cause to say, okay, so these are the symptoms. Where is this coming from? And functional medicine really looks at it from a holistic standpoint, where if you go to conventional, they separate everything.
They do.
And at times that can be helpful because they're focusing on one particular thing, but they're missing all of the pieces. Because if one system starts to lag or have deficiency, then all of the other ones, because it's you don't live in a vacuum, all of
Right.
those other systems are connected. And so if you have inflammation in one area, it's going to start catching fire in other areas. And that's why I like to just think about it as like that burning house, is that you want to put that fire out. And when you go down to that cellular level, that's where you have to start paying attention. It's like, okay, so what are my cells missing? What do they need?
Yeah, that's a great explanation, Jen, for that. Absolutely. And the other thing you said, it reminded me of me when I was a little girl. My famous line was, I'm a good girl for the sugar, because my
Yep.
parents always tried to like limit sugar, so they were,
Yeah.
and my dad was a general and vascular surgeon, and I have to say he was in private practice, which is unheard of today. Now they're all like corporate cogs in a machine. Imagine my father was a surgeon, and he always said to me, that's a last resort. I never want to put the body through that unless I absolutely have to. He was the one that when I was like, when I was a little kid, got us on drinking water. I was the only one who listened. I'm the youngest of five. Like, drink water, it flushes your kidneys, that kind of thing. But let's talk about sugar, because I don't
Hmm.
think people really understand how damaging it is. And look, I'll admit it. I love sugar, right?
Hmm.
I limit it, or I don't eat it at all. I'm not going to say I'm perfect, but I'm pretty
Yeah.
close to zero on there, because like you said, once you feel
Hmm.
great, like you want to keep feeling great. You're
Hmm.
like, I don't want to go
Yep.
back to how I felt before.
Yep.
So let's talk about sugar a little bit and why it's so damaging to the body.
Yeah, so sugar, it's very multifaceted. So back in the day, so if we go back into like the early 1900s, the average American was only maybe consuming for a year, maybe like 4 pounds of sugar. Today, that number is 150 pounds of sugar a year for per person on the average. So if you think about that, what does that do to our cells? Our body was never made to really handle that kind of amount of sugar. And the sugar itself, the refined sugar, because it's been put through that process, it is more of like the fructose. So it really sets off a different cascade in your body. And not to get like too into the weeds with things, but it's going to help increase that insulin level. And so with that amount of sugar coming in, those insulin levels are always going to be on the rise. And sugar is in everything. And we always think like, hey, yeah, in my mind, I think I want something. But more and more research is coming out about our gut microbiomes and the microbes that are in there. And so we have 37 trillion cells in our body, but in our gut microbe, we actually have about maybe around 100 trillion microbes. And those microbes are very integral in not just our digestive process, but it's also integral into our mental health and our emotions, because they create the neurotransmitters. So when we think that we want sugar, it's actually the microbes in our gut that are ringing the bell to say, hey, brain, and it comes up through the vagus nerve. They signal to the brain, look for sugar, I'm hungry. So we think it's us, but it's really not. It's our gut microbes that are looking for that sugar. And what happens then when we're intaking so much sugar is that our glucose spikes rapidly throughout the day. So if we start off with like a donut and maybe some other pastries or some cereal in the morning, that's going to
Yeah.
send that glucose level up. And our body can only take so much of that. So if you think about almost like these are like ocean waves crashing into you. And so if you're putting sugar in multiple times a day like that, up and down, your pancreas has to push out all this insulin, and it really affects your body because it never gets a break from the waves. And that increases inflammation. It also increases oxidation in our bodies. So when we have more sugar, if you think about rust on a car, if well, maybe not today's cars, because I don't think they're, if you think about like some of the 70s and 80s where you can see the rust
Yeah.
on the outside,
Hmm.
that is what sugar does to our bodies on the inside. So it causes oxidative stress. And if we have too much of it, it's going to age us on the inside and then even on the outside in different ways.
Yeah. Well, and I think another image for that is like an apple. When you cut an apple and
Hmm.
just leave it out,
Yep.
it
Yep.
turns brown.
Yep.
Yeah, imagine
Yep.
that happening
Yep.
to your body. I know,
Yep.
that's crazy.
That's what happens.
So, Jen, let's talk about the gut-brain axis because you kind of alluded to it there. So, the
Sure.
gut microbiome, mental health, dementia, Alzheimer's, all of these things we could talk about connected. So, talk a
Yep.
little bit about that so that the audience understands.
Yeah, so the research on that gut microbiome has been coming out more and more because they're starting to really realize how important it really is. So the microbes within us help us. We're very symbiotic relationships. So the microbes in there help, break down, excuse me, break down the foods that we eat and helps us to get out the nutrients, and those nutrients go through that small intestinal tract, but they also help to create the neurotransmitters and different things for our body to help create the ATP for the energy. But when we look at that gut brain axis, the microbes down there talk to our brain. Our brain talks less to our stomach than our stomach talks to our brain, and our gut the gut itself has neural network on top. And it was fascinating. The other day, I was watching a documentary, and the two things that are created first when a child is created is the brain and the gut, and it
Wow,
actually pulls
interesting.
apart. And so the gut itself has that neural network, and if you think about it, it makes sense because that's what's creating so much of the neurotransmitters, and it has to be able to talk to the brain because of that fuel source. And so up the vagus nerve it goes, and it helps to communicate. Like our oxytocin is made in, a lot of it's made in our gut. The serotonin, about 90 to 95% of that is made in our gut. And so if we put these in terms of mental health, the foods that we're eating, if we're not eating nutrient dense food that provides those microbes what they need, they're not going to be able to create the things, the neurotransmitters that our brain needs to function. And so, if we are taking in, or if our gut microbiome is more bad bacteria than good bacteria, it's not going to be making enough of the neurotransmitters that our brain needs to function at optimal levels. And that's what the sugar can create. That's what, if we're eating a lot of processed foods that have preservatives and additives, that's going to create more of a dysbiosis, and that's going to fuel more bad bacteria than good. And so there we lose all of the things that help to make our brain healthier because it's not getting the nutrients that it needs to process. And when we were talking about sugar, when you bring up dementia and Alzheimer's, functional medicine has been looking at that as type 3 diabetes. And that goes back to those glucose levels going up and down, up and down. And the way that it affects the brain, because the glucose, there's too much coming into the brain to function. So it's getting overloaded. And so whenever we have that excessive dopamine hit, people will talk about being addiction. What happens is you always have to have more because it kind of dulls the dopamine hit. So you have to keep pushing more. Same kind of premise when we're talking about dementia and Alzheimer's is that it's looking at it from saying, okay, it keeps getting hit with all of this sugar and it's too much. So it has to dull the responsiveness. So if we think about it a little bit in those terms, we can start to see the pattern forming that when the things that we're eating really do impact how our brains function. And then later on in life, if it can form into a dementia and Alzheimer's.
Yeah. And it's interesting. I don't know if you follow Dr. Chris Palmer.
Yes, I do. I've read his book.
Yeah.
Yep. Yep.
Yeah, he's
It's
amazing. And
fantastic.
he's a
Yep.
psychiatrist. And I mean, he finally came out kind of similar to you, where you were like, I don't want to
Mhm.
hide this anymore. I want to share this with
Yep.
people. He was
Yep.
having so much success getting his patients on, keto
Yep.
that after several years, he was like, I can't keep this a secret anymore. And
Hmm.
it's amazing just
Yep.
how much like that affects your mental health. I mean,
Yeah. It
unbelievable.
is. Yeah.
And
It
I
really
also
is.
wanted to say, Jen, too, like, we're hearing a lot about food right now, that whole
Hmm.
movement. And you were talking about having to keep getting that dopamine hit, needing more and more. Well, the food companies, right, they figured out the
Hmm.
science behind that and they
Hmm.
make things hyper palatable. And that is
Yep.
another reason to stay away from processed foods.
Yeah.
Can you talk about
Absolutely.
that a little bit? Yeah.
Yeah. Absolutely. And truly, and that's why I tell a lot of my clients, in a lot of cases, it really isn't your fault. Because when you're eating these foods that are on the shelves and you think that they're okay, and then you're eating them and you're not realizing what you're putting into your body and how it affects your body. And they are created, those foods have been put through multiple tests. That's why there are food scientists and there are food, they help with like if it breaks a certain way, if it's a certain decibel of crunch, that hits the brain in a different way. So for us to understand that it's being engineered. So if you almost think of those bags of chips, those, and again, I was,
Can't stop at one, right?
yep, you can't stop at one. And then even like with the baked snacks and like that kind of stuff, like the baked
Yeah.
goods. I don't want to single out like one company or another, but
Understand, yeah.
yeah,
Yeah.
but they are created to hit certain sensors in your brain or even on your tongue. So let's just take something like for MSG. MSG will keep you hungry. It will signal to your brain, hey, I'm still hungry. And again, we go back to that gut microbiome. If we are not getting the nutrients in, our cells are going to keep saying to us, hey, I'm still hungry. Keep feeding me because I'm not getting the energy that I need. So really, we have a country where we're eating a lot more food, but we are actually technically malnourished because our bodies are not getting the nutrients they need to function at an optimal capacity. And that's where a lot of this disease and everything else comes from.
Yeah, I mean, it's really alarming, actually, like the situation we're in now. And
Mhm.
it really upsets me too. Like sometimes, let's say some older relatives, right, who grew up at a time when food wasn't being processed and it was really easy to lose weight, will look at somebody who's overweight and be like, oh my God, they just need to eat less. Oh my God, how
Mhm.
do you get that
Mhm.
fat? These are things that
Mhm.
I've heard. I'm not going to
Sure.
mention
Yeah.
anyone in particular,
Yeah.
but that generation, because they grew up with real food, it was easier to lose weight. So,
Yeah.
and now let me just say too, I'm not into shaming people, but on the other hand, I think this body positivity movement is doing a lot of
Mhm.
damage because obesity is not healthy. I
Yeah.
would never mock or criticize anyone
Of
for being
course.
fat.
Yeah.
Listen, I went through it myself. I was an overweight kid
Right.
going through school. I
Sure.
get that,
Yeah.
right? I would never do that
Absolutely.
to anybody. On the other hand, I think we should be encouraging people, hey, here's
Mhm.
what we can do to turn this around and help you achieve optimal health. Um,
Yeah. Yeah, and what I would add to that is to say it's not to shame anybody, but it's to say there's so many other things. It's kind of like the ripple effect when are overweight or obese. It opens the floodgates for other things to be wrong, and it adds
yes.
more of those comorbidities. So it really brings in other issues that if we can start to look at more like a whole foods diet and try to stop more of the processed, and you start to help lose that weight, but also working on the things that I help with are those lifestyle factors. So a lot of what has happened when people are it's not even just the foods, but it's the emotional eating, the way that people have grown up. And it's the things that we've acquired over decades, those habits that have happened. And so me as a health coach, I help my clients to not just unpack, okay, what is in your food, but what does food do for you? What is it providing for you? When you were growing up, what did the around the table look like? What did your house look like as far as what were the foods coming in and how did you use them? Were they helpful when you were sad? Did they help you when to be happy? So there's a lot of emotional connection with food because we use it for so many different things because obviously it's a fuel source for us. And like you were saying, like, oh, Dad, I'm celebrating, I can have this piece of chocolate or I can have this sugar. We use it in different ways.
Yep.
And really sugar especially is a drug that's accepted and it's in everything.
Yeah. It's like alcohol. Yeah.
Yep.
Which also contains sugar.
Yep.
So yeah.
Yep. Yep. Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, it's hard and it's like, you can't even watch like I love sports, right? Phillies
Hmm.
game, baseball just started
Hmm.
right last night or
Yep.
even football games, right? You cannot watch a game without being bombarded with like, Dom I shouldn't name the names, but pizza
Yeah.
commercial.
Yeah. Yeah.
One that looks so gross. It doesn't even look like real food to me. Like I see that and I'm like, who would even want to order this pizza? I won't name the company.
Yeah.
And not to mention alcohol. I mean,
Hmm.
which sugar basically too, with the
Yep.
with the added effect of impairing people's judgment when they're driving or trying to function. So it's hard.
Yeah, it really is. And it's hard to navigate. And it's not to say that all of these things are awful. And the thing that I tell my client is that it's always your choice. I can't tell somebody what they can and they can't eat, but I do think people should know what is in their food and what they're drinking and how it can affect their body. If they want to do those things, that is their choice. But like you brought up alcohol. Alcohol has the sugar, but it also is created like when it takes it in, your body sees it as a toxin. So your liver sees
Yep.
it as a toxin and will want to push that out first. So what happens is if you were trying to lose weight and you were drinking, you were actually working against yourself because your body will always. So let's say you have a meal and you have a drink. And you have that drink, and your body's going to process that alcohol first because it sees it as a toxin. It turns into acetaldehyde in your body. And your liver wants to push that out first. So it will slow your metabolism down to do that first. So all that food will sit in there until that's processed first, and then it will process all the other things. But then what will happen is a lot of times when that does occur, is that it's going to slow it down and then it's going to be stored as fat. So if you're trying to lose weight, the alcohol will not do you any favors at all. And it's actually working against what you're trying to do. Plus the sugar aspect, like you said.
And Jen, that reminds me too, there's another cultural thing going on, the mommy wine culture, which I
Mm-hmm.
think is so damaging, to women. And in a minute, I do want to talk about women and how you work with them. But, I also want to say too, like, I grew up thinking diabetes ran in my family. And I'm talking about type
Mm-hmm.
2. I'm not talking about type 1, which is an
Right.
autoimmune condition, which you can still
Correct.
assist with real food and low carb.
Yep.
And when I discovered Dr. Atkins, and I think it was in 1999, like it just blew my
Mm-hmm.
mind. Like
Mm-hmm.
I always had this mindset, like I'm not getting it. That's not for me. I don't want it. But then I didn't really have the science behind it until I read
Mm-hmm.
his book, and oh my God.
Yep.
And that worked for me for many years until I developed Hashimoto's. And, and
Mm-hmm.
that's the other thing too. Like when you have an autoimmune condition like Hashi, you're not
Mm-hmm.
going to lose weight
Yep.
until you resolve that core issue. And then once I
Yep.
did, it became easy again. And really, like Benazati says, like weight is really a symptom
Mm-hmm.
of a larger problem. Would you agree with that? And
Yes. Yes, I would. Yeah, I think a lot of times it happens because again, if we go back to that root cause, what is the root cause of this? So there's a mechanism within somebody who might be overweight or obese. So it could be like that thyroid function, which is that metabolism. And one of the things that's not talked about a lot is that chronic stress too, and the way that that impacts the overall way that our bodies function. Because if we look at that HPA axis, which is your hypothalamus, your pituitary, and your adrenals, that hypothalamus, it's not just responsible for releasing the cortisol or for your stress response, it's also responsible for your hormone balance, it's sleep wake cycle, your rest and digestion, your metabolism, and your fluids, your homeostasis. So it has a bunch of functions because it's responsible for that stress response because wants to keep you safe. So if we think about it in those terms, if we are in chronic stress and we can't digest food well, that's going to deplete nutrition because our bodies won't absorb the nutrients. And then if we're taking in loads of foods every day, which our bodies are not used to, because back in the early 1900s, we didn't have, we didn't have the refrigerators like we do today
yeah,
and the food that's constantly around us. So if we're putting all of that in, our bodies can only handle it and says, okay, well then I'm going to start storing this. And if we have a stress response, it's going to say, okay, I can't process this now. I'm either not hungry or I'm going to store all of this as fat. Like it changes that hormone balance. So it really does, open up the gateways when you have obesity or gaining weight, and you have to start looking at it from that root cause perspective versus looking at, oh, it's just a weight problem, it's just a food problem. It's a lot deeper than just that.
yeah. Oh, they're just eating too much. Like eat less and
Right.
move more. That's a big conventional medicine thing that
Yep.
doctors like to tell patients. Like how unhelpful is that? Like it's
Well, and frustrating because if people do
yeah.
that and it and
Well,
it decreases their metabolism, then they have a bigger problem.
exactly. And it's patient shaming too. Like this is all your fault, and
Mm-hmm.
that's what I love about functional medicine is because it sort of
Mm-hmm.
demands some participation on
Mm-hmm.
the part of the patient or the client.
Mm-hmm.
And as like
Mm-hmm.
you said, you can't force somebody to do something, but you can give them the information and the
Yep.
tools that they need to make a decision. And I
Yep.
think probably by the
Absolutely.
time people get to you, they've had it and they are ready and they're motivated.
Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Um,
Yeah.
I think, and plus because it's coming from a different perspective. I told one client the one time that she wasn't eating enough. She's like, "What?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I want you to eat more, and I want you to eat this threshold." And I said, "And I want you to work out like this way." Because we worked on like, what she enjoyed doing, and we started. And she messaged me in our private chat that we have, and she was like, "Jen, it's working." And I'm like, "I know, because your body's not in starvation mode anymore." And it's
Yeah.
starting to feel like it's getting nourished. It's not afraid, and it's letting go of the things that it's storing. And if we bring those stress levels down even more, you're going to see even more happen.
Yeah. Oh
Yeah,
my gosh, that must be so exciting for you when
yeah,
somebody
yeah.
that kind of success.
It's the best part of my job. It's the
Yeah.
best part of my job. Yeah.
That's awesome because the whole calories in, calories out fallacy is
Mhm.
another thing that we've been lied to about. I mean, I'm not saying that calories don't matter at all,
Right.
but like if you're talking about like I'm making up numbers here, but like a steak that's 1,000 calories versus eating, I don't
Hmm.
know, a bowl of ice cream that's a
Yep.
thousand calories. Which one is better for you? Which
Yep.
one should you choose?
Yep.
And
It. Yeah. Go ahead.
No, go ahead, Jen.
Yeah,
Sorry.
I was gonna say it goes back to I don't know if anybody also listens to like Dr. Mark Hyman, and one of the
Yes.
things that he always says is that calories are important, but not all calories are equal. So if you have like let's say you have a bag of chips that has all of these ingredients in here that you don't know how to pronounce and you don't even know what they are, versus having like you said maybe like a steak with like some potatoes and a salad and some other things, all of that food, so that could be a couple plates full of food, are the same amount calorically as that bag of chips if you would eat the whole bag. But you're getting more nutrients out of that steak, the salad, the potatoes for those cells. Remember, if we go down to that cellular level, those cells can use all of those nutrients. Whereas in that bag of potato chips with all of these chemicals, your cells are sitting there saying, what is this? How can I use this? Can I, well, maybe I compare this. And if it's not, our body stores fat. It uses for three different things. So it'll store excess hormones, excess glucose, and then toxins. So that is what our fat will store. So if you think about it, our liver's saying, I don't know what this might be. Okay, I'll store this over here. Oh, I don't know what this is. I'll store this over here. So if we think about it in those terms, if we get rid of some of those pieces, then the fat doesn't necessarily accumulate because it's not getting stored because we've removed that part. Let's say it's like the additives and the preservatives. It's one less thing that your body has to contend with.
Yeah, exactly. And that meal you just described is so satiating
Oh yeah.
to have the steak with the salad and the vegetable
Hmm.
or the,
Yep.
yeah. And I think that's another thing. I think people are blown away because,
Hmm.
when I was a little kid, my mom took me to Weight Watchers and like steak was like a no-no. That was like very limited. And, and meanwhile, I had to eat cereal with skim milk. Like I can still taste it. It was so gross. I hate skim milk. It's disgusting. Like
Yep.
people eat real fat, like drink the
Yep.
whole milk. It's crazy, but I want to ask you, Jen, too. So you started on the autoimmune protocol. So is that more like of a way of eating that's sort of a bridge to get you healthy, and
Hmm.
then you kind of start experimenting with adding foods back in? Can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah, sure. So, some people might have heard of what's called like an elimination diet. So it's just a little bit
Yeah.
stricter than a regular elimination diet because it's taking out a couple more things than an elimination diet would do. But in that autoimmune protocol diet, what it does is you go down to really like bare bones and gives your body a break from everything else. And then after you can do it for 4 to 6 weeks. I did 6 because I wanted to make sure like the system was clean.
Yeah.
And then so what I did was after that you start adding in different foods. So the first thing I added in were eggs because I couldn't even have eggs on that. So I added those back in. And what you do is you add that in for like the first 3 days, because typically you'll see like sensitivities within 3 days. You'll see like an allergic, if you have an allergic trigger or something like that, within like 24 to 48 hours, and sometimes immediate, depending on the allergy itself. So that was done so that I could start to understand what my body liked and what it didn't like, and what my food triggers were. So it would help me to say, okay, what are the foods that I'm going to put into my body to help make sure that it's running in its optimal function. And so for me, I learned like the nightshades were a little bit more of a problem for me. So I don't consume those on a regular basis because that kind of triggers my body a little bit. Having like some of the nightshades are like some eggplant or tomatoes, potatoes. And the funny thing is, after I cut out things in my diet, tomatoes are the thing that I actually miss the most. I don't miss the sugar, I don't miss the booze, I don't miss all of those things. It was the tomatoes for me. So when you do that though, when you go from that diet, you do start to come out of it, and then you do start to try to tweak and find what works best for you. So what I would do for me was I started back on something like a paleo diet where I cut out like some of the nuts and seeds just to give my digestion a break so I wouldn't have so much roughage. A lot of people will say the salads. I don't do salads very well because of my intestinal tract, my body just doesn't like them as much. So I really stick to a little bit more of the fruits and some veggies, but leafy greens are not my forte anymore. But that's where really figuring out what works best for your body, because everybody's body is different. And so I don't say to one person, oh yeah, do the same thing that, your neighbor does. The thing I tell my
Right.
clients is that you're different. You can think about what they do, but tailor it to what you enjoy and what you like, or what your body likes and what it doesn't like. Because no two, I hate to use diet, I almost say like eating style. So no two eating styles are
Yes.
the same.
Yes. And that's another thing I love that I've learned in functional medicine. There's bio-individuality.
Mm-hmm.
And even like with me, like what works for me with Hashimoto's might not work for another person with Hashimoto's.
Yep.
Some people can't
Yep.
take low dose naltrexone. I have no problem with it, and it balances the
Mm-hmm.
immune system. So it's very individualized. So Jen, I want to take that a step further though, because you deal with a lot of female clients, right?
Mm-hmm.
And do you deal with women maybe who might be going through perimenopause or menopause, and that throws a whole other wrench
Oh,
into things.
yes.
So talk a little bit about that and how you sort of tailor a program to a client.
Yes. So one of the things that I tell a lot of my female clients that are going through perimenopause and menopause is that you can't use the same tools that you used in your 20s and your 30s now. You got to throw that toolbox out. It's not the same because our hormones are really shifting. So you can't approach it the same way. And a lot of the things that when I'm working with somebody with perimenopause and menopause is the first thing is I really look at mindset. I want to see what we're doing, how we're doing things, and really looking at it because a lot of women, I think, have been tailored, I don't want to say tailored, but made to think that their body has to look a certain way. And, the biggest thing for my clients is I want to lose weight. I want to do this. I want to do that. So then I actually start off, and I have a newer program that I just launched after using it with some of my clients is we look at mindset first and identity because that is one of the most crucial pieces as you're moving through any kind of weight loss or any kind of transformational change in your health is to really figure out, okay, who am I? And what am I, what are my goals? What am I really trying to attain? And where do I have some of my strengths and where do I have some of my weaknesses? And the same goes for like perimenopause, because in that time frame, one of the biggest things that you'll hear is like, I don't feel like myself anymore because we are losing that estrogen. The brain is always the first because we have the estrogen receptors in there. So the brain you will start to feel it there first, and then you'll have the other symptoms. And so then it's like, okay, so if we are shifting out of something that we have known for the past 20, maybe 20 to 30 years, depending on when when you first got your menses and everything else, is to say, okay, who am I? And then what do my stress levels look like? What does my nutrition look like? And we really start at that foundational level and say, okay, where do I want to go? And having that clear roadmap really, I think, helps people to understand, okay, this is where I want to go. And then we bring in a lot of the things. There are a lot of women doctors out there that are putting quite a bit of information up for perimenopause and menopause. So we try to work through some of those. As a health coach, I can't technically treat or diagnose anybody, but what I can do is say, okay, here's some things that might be able to help you. And we can start working through this and see if these things help for you and looking at some of those symptoms and working on that. But you have to change the toolbox that you're using in perimenopause and menopause because it's not the same
Yeah.
as when we were younger. Because the hormones, I mean, perimenopause is chaos. It's been
Yes, it
defined
is.
as the moment of chaos. And for too long, women were put in a corner saying, oh, just deal with it or take an antidepressant.
Yeah.
Which was
Yeah.
infuriating. And I'm so glad that people are starting to recognize that they need to have good health care as well.
Yeah. I know. Finally. Yeah. Here's a
Yeah.
pill for depression. You're just depressed, you know?
Yeah.
So Jen, I want to ask you too, before I want to talk about your new program, but I want to ask you too, what are your thoughts on like intermittent fasting, sunlight, circadian rhythm, all of those good things that we hear about now?
So those are wonderful. So all of the above. So circadian rhythm, I've really started to drill into this and help my clients to understand the effects of the sun. We should not fear the sun. It is actually one of our greatest allies and how we can use it. And so that helps with the sleep. It helps with your stress levels. And so understanding what works best for your body. Now, there are some different chronotypes for different people because, again, people are different. But
Right.
understanding that if you get up and have the sun, hit your eyes in the morning, decreasing that blue light as much as possible because that sends different signals, especially in your evening. But understanding how the light impacts us, the blue lights increase our insulin. So when we have that happen, then that can increase obesity. It can increase diabetes. So when we start to understand, okay, changing our indoor light and making sure we're getting outdoor light is very crucial. And then for some of the other things, if you're looking at, just like sleep regimen, and I'm trying to remember one of the other things that you brought up besides the light, the circadian
Oh,
rhythm.
yeah, circadian rhythm, like intermittent fasting,
Oh, the
like
intermittent
eating
fasting.
when the sun is up, actually,
Yep.
too. Like,
Yep.
yeah.
Yeah. So that is very very interesting because I started doing that myself before I even tell my clients to do it. So I experiment on myself for different ways. And I actually lost weight more that way. But the way that I do intermittent fasting, and if you aren't familiar with intermittent fasting, it's really looking at like a fasting window. So if you think about it almost like time restricted eating. So in a 24-hour cycle, you would be looking at maybe to start off with like a 12-hour fast and 12-hour eating window. So like 7 to 7. Or as you go in further, you can do like a 16-8. And then some people even do like a 20 and a 4 for like an OMAD, or OMAD means 1 meal a day.
Yeah.
And what I have found with doing a little bit more of a shorter window, I actually increased more of my breakfast and my lunch, and I have a very short, very light dinner that has kept my weight, very stable. My hormones are very stable. And again, everybody's different, but trying to figure out what works best for you. But eating with that sunlight is very, very important. And I've told my clients that a lot of times because again, it signals to your brain through your eyes different things.
Yeah, and I mean, I know for myself, I can speak from personal experience. I sleep better when there's
Mm-hmm.
at least 4 to 5 hours between my last meal and when I go to
Mm-hmm.
bed.
Yep.
You
Yep.
know, and
Yep.
and it makes a huge difference.
It really
So
does.
Jen, I want to make sure we talk about this because you
Yeah.
just launched a new program for high achieving women who are tired of the word diet. Like I'm so sick of
Yep.
that word too. So tell us about that and how it works and maybe how anybody could get involved in it.
Yeah, so it really came from working with a lot of my women that I work with every day, and it's called the Reset and Rise program. And it really starts off with what I just talked about a little bit ago, where is that foundational, looking at from an identity standpoint. It's not starting off with the food and nutrition right away. While it is very important, one of the things that I've really seen, especially for women that are going through perimenopause, menopause, and even if you're a little bit before that, is that identity piece. Because so many of us identify with a number on a scale instead of who we really are. And for me, it's to say, okay, we're going to throw the scale out the window for right now, and we're going to look at who are you as a woman? Who are you? And what are the things that you want? And how can we start looking at the habits that you've had and start piecing that out? So that's like the first phase. And then the second phase is then we start to dive into your stress patterns, because stress is one of the biggest causes of, it's about 90% of why people go to the doctor is caused by chronic stress. So we're looking at that stress factor because that's not typically looked at if you go to like any other weight loss program and stuff. They'll just say, here's your food plan, here's this and that. We want to look holistically. So we're looking at that stress. We're looking at sleep, because during sleep, that is when our body restores and repairs things. And we actually lose weight while we're sleeping if we're doing it correctly. But if we're not, then we have bigger problems. So understanding where that sleep comes in is very integral. And then of course, looking at nutrition to say, okay, what does this look like for me? What do my macros look like? I don't like to calorie count. I look at macros a little bit more. And the reason that I do that is to say, okay, this is what my plate looks like. So here's my protein, my fats, and my carbohydrates. And so even if you do have to track a little bit at first, but it's going to show you what your plate should look like going forward. And that to me makes it easier for people. So they might not have to track as long, because then they start to learn what their plates should look like. And then finally, of course, in the last piece is to help empower you so that this is really the last weight loss program you will ever need. And I'm very confident in that, because we're changing it from an identity level and not just saying, okay, we're changing food. We're changing the way that you look at yourself, the way you feel about yourself, and the way you look at the goals that you have set for yourself. And providing you with things like, one of the hardest things for my clients is like going to an event. How do I eat, when I go here, if I travel? And that's all discussed in the last phase of the program, because those are the real life factors to say, okay, how do I handle this when I go out other places? How can I keep with this sustainability? Because my goal is that you won't need me anymore for all of my clients. I don't want them to be with me for life. That's how I'm a little bit different from conventional. I don't want a customer for life. I want to empower them to make the decisions for their health that works best for them, so that they can live long, healthy lives, a great health span. I just want them to tell all their friends.
Absolutely, Jen. Now, this is so needed because I think, women have always told you have to be skinny, and that
Yep.
skinny is not healthy, people.
No.
Like, you want
No.
strong muscles. That's
Yep.
another thing. You encourage lifting, get to the gym,
Yes.
because I think women traditionally not, focus so much on aerobics. And I was a cardio queen until I found functional medicine, and they were like, stop doing cardio and start lifting. So,
Yep. Yep.
yeah.
And I think as women, you hit the nail on the head right there, is that we think, oh, I can't go, I don't want to lift because I don't want to bulk up. Trust me, you're not going to bulk up unless you are training to bulk up. When you
Right.
go into the gym, and you should be lifting heavy. Women, especially in perimenopause, menopause, protein, it is not a trend, it is not a fad. It just was never out in front like it should have been. And it's being
Right.
shown more of it's so integral. It's a building block for our body. And if we have to make sure we're getting tons of protein. If you're a perimenopausal woman, make sure you're getting the protein that you need for your body weight every day. And then
Yeah.
doing that strength training. You don't want to over exercise because that can shift those hormones and stuff too. But you want to make sure
Right.
that you're lifting heavy, because those muscles play such a huge role in your glucose metabolism. It's going to help with your bone health, because osteoporosis, women are 2/3 of the cases for osteoporosis, and we're 2/3 for dementia. And more muscle you have, it helps you for both. So
Yeah.
lifting those weights and lifting heavy, don't injure yourself, of course. Make sure that you're doing it in a responsible way, but lifting heavier is
Yeah.
going to help build those muscles.
Yeah, absolutely. I love the gym that I go to. I mean,
Hmm.
and I don't have a trainer right now, but I used to live off and on like really throughout my life. And my dad we had a gym at home in our
Oh,
basement. So,
nice.
but
Yeah.
I'm finally like being consistent with it now over the
Hmm.
past several years, like, really, really doing that. And then I do like yoga and Pilates sort of in
Oh,
between,
awesome. Yep.
just to keep stretching. But it is really important. So, Jen, how can somebody get in touch with you? And I also wanted to ask you, do you work with people? Can they live anywhere? Like, talk to us about that too.
Oh, yeah, yeah, you can live anywhere in the US. I do mostly virtual hybrid, or virtual. I do a little bit of hybrid because I do some metabolic testing in my local area. So I do metabolic testing as well to help people get the individualized macronutrients. So if you are in the central Pennsylvania area, I do that as well. But yeah, I can work with anybody virtually. All they have to do is go onto my website, compasshealthcoachingllc.com, and everybody gets a free 30-minute consultation, and we can look at. I want to hear about like what your needs are, and I'll tell you about how the programs work. Or if you wanted to, you don't necessarily have to do a program. It can be just one-on-ones, and we can work through and create a plan that fits for you. So that's how they can get in touch with me, or they can even follow me on social media at first as well. Compass Health
Yeah.
Coaching LLC on Facebook, Instagram, and LinkedIn. And from there, they could see I like to do educational stuff, and they can see from there if it's somebody they would want to work with.
Yeah, fantastic. I love that you give them so many different options too.
Yeah.
That's wonderful. Yeah, so Jen, let me ask you too one other quick thing. So would you recommend lab work that somebody should get done if they don't live close to you and they can't, you would recommend like blood work they should have and things like that?
I would say if you can try to get some recent blood work, it's very helpful because, and most conventional medicine won't do insulin. And if you're looking for weight loss, get an
Fasting insulin.
insulin,
Yeah.
get a fasting insulin test, because that's going to help us see if you do have insulin resistance or not, or where you are on that scale. Because the
Yeah.
glucose and the A1C, which help measure the glucose in your body, and the A1C is the last 3 months of your glucose levels in your body. But the fasting insulin will actually show more insulin resistance first before you will ever see it on your glucose and your A1C. So if you can get that, especially if you're looking for weight loss, it's very helpful, because then it gives us the data to say, okay, what are we working with and how can we make it so that it goes faster and less maybe frustrating for you? But if you don't have it, we can still tweak things and work on things as well.
Great. Yeah, I just want to say too, another thing about conventional medicine, I think like fasting insulin, if it's like 18, they still consider that normal. Where
Yeah.
functional medicine, most practitioners I've worked with want it to be like between 4 and 6, or at least
Yep.
at the very least lower than 8. And
Yep.
it's like they're like 18, you're still good. No, 18, you're diabetic. I
Yeah.
mean, you can
Yeah.
still reverse things, but you're
Yeah.
diabetic. You know.
And I think that's one of the things that people need to realize as well, is that in the conventional side of things, the ranges are completely different, and they're a lot higher. And I don't want to say that it's done on purpose necessarily, because I think the way that they find the ranges is that they take the average of the bigger group. But if the bigger group is not functioning optimally, then it's not going to give you
Right.
your optimal range. It's really looking at, okay, this is like a normal range because it's this big a group of people. But functional medicine really narrows it down. So like, let's say the diabetic. So if we're looking at an A1C level, they're looking at something like a 5 point, you don't want to go over a 5.4. That starts to get in the danger zone
Yeah.
because they want to stop it. But if you go for traditional medicine, or conventional medicine, it's a lot higher. And so, I'll have people say, "Oh, well, I'm in normal." I'm like, "Look, you don't want to keep going that way. You really want to bring that down to this level." And, and one of the things I would also say is make your vitamin D levels. Vitamin D is very
Oh,
crucial.
yeah.
So making sure that your vitamin D levels, optimal range is at least between 60 and 80, but you want to be above 50. And a lot of people are below that, and that's why you have those immune issues. You'll have hormone issues and everything else. You want to get that up because that vitamin D acts as a hormone in your body. So definitely want to make
Yeah.
sure that's a good level.
Oh my gosh.
It
Well,
is.
Jen, I'm going to put all the information in the show notes. I want to thank you
Okay.
so much for joining
Oh,
me today. Is
sure.
there anything else you want to share that maybe we didn't discuss before we end today?
I would say probably to anybody out there that if you do have like a diagnosis or anything like that, that doesn't define who you are. You define who you are. And just because you have something and somebody says you're going to need medications, likelihood is that you don't. They told me I'd be on medications the rest of my life, and I got off all of my medications within 9 months, and I haven't been on them since. And I haven't had a flare in 5 years because I took control of my health and was able to change lifestyle habits so that I don't need that anymore. And if I can do it, a candy girl who's addicted to sugar her whole life, you can certainly make the changes. I'm not saying it's easy because it's decades of work of habits, but it's worth it on the other side. And I speak from somebody who's changed it and loves it every single day.
Amen. Well, let me just add something to that too, Jen. That's very, very important. Stop thinking that you have to see somebody who's on your insurance. Like
Yep.
invest in your health because when you have your health, you can create more wealth. If you're worried about that,
Yes.
it's so worth it to pay the money to work with a professional like you who's
Yep.
actually going to help you get on the other side, address the root cause, fix it. And
Yep.
then, when you feel great, you can do anything. I mean, that's how
Yep.
I looked at it. And I still work with Dr. Amy Horniman. I'm part of her
Yeah.
progression plan,
Mhm.
because I want to keep feeling well.
Yep. Yeah, and I would say that too. I'm not a huge fan of the insurance industry because during my illness, I actually had them reject certain tests that my doctor, even my conventional doctor, asked them to run, and I had to pay out of pocket for that. But I was diagnosed with something, and they denied me to have that test run. And so for me, it was like, you know what? No, thank you. So I, do my best not to have anything inside that system because
Me too.
I know my health. Nobody knows your body better than you do. Not a doctor, not an insurance company, no one. You live in your body every single day. And so you need to take control of that. And if they say you can't, then you say, I'm done. You're fired. I'm finding somebody else.
Well said, Jen. Bravo. I love that.
Yeah,
Yes,
thank you.
absolutely. Well, thank you so much for joining me today, Jen. And my gosh, you are welcome back anytime. If you have any
Oh, thank
programs,
you.
anything else you want to talk about,
Oh,
would
yes,
love
thank
to
you.
have you.
Oh, it's been a joy. Thank you so much for having me today.
Thanks, Jen. Take care.
Yep, you too.
Hi, I'm Dr. Liz. I just want to tell you how amazing and easy it was to work with Daria on my book. You see, I've had a book for a while, been sitting on my desk, sitting on my computer. Maybe you might be able to relate to that. And I didn't know what to do, how to take it to the next step, how to make it look polished and edited and easy and useful for my readers. Met with Daria. We had some great conversations. She learned my voice, my goal, my style, and she was able to edit and give me feedback on how to make my message clearer, more focused, polished, and it worked. I have a book. In fact, I have a book and a workbook that she's edited for me and guided me along the pathway. So if you're maybe a little bit like me, that you have a book or you have an idea and you haven't known where to take it, how to take it to the next stage, reach out to Daria. She's a game changer and she's really easy to work with and takes great pride in her work as well. So join me in the published author arena. Reach out to Daria. I'm Dr. Liz.